We interrupt this program to bring you a special news. We interrupt this program to bring you a special
broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Bring you this important bulletin from the United Press.
This is not a test. Every Tuesday, the Journey into Comics Network will bring you The Puhr Report, your one-stop podcast shop for everything news and topics of personal interest. I am your host, Andrew Puhr, and you can hear me every Tuesday.
The following is a Journey into Comics Network production.
Hey, this is Josh Richmond, and you are listening to the Voice of Survival podcast, exclusively on the Journey into Comics Network.
You're listening to the Voice of Survival podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Nate Phillips.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to episode 6 of the Voice of Survival podcast. As the introduction said, I'm your host, Nate, and today joining me is a very special guest. He is the lead host of the Puhr Report, creator of the Puhr Report, actually. He also is a co-host on Foodies Watching Movies. I've known this gentleman for about 10 years of my life. In an interesting set of circumstances, I'm going to retell kind of what I remember about meeting him. So I started working at GameStop in 2007. That tale has been recounted on The Voice of Survival Episode 1. To fast forward it a little bit, one thing that I kind of loved about, being a guy who sold video games to people is, like, I got to feed that addiction, and in a way that was like, I'm not selling you fucking heroin or some crazy shit. I'm just saying, dude, there's this really awesome video game, and I think that with your personality and who you are and what I get from you when you come around, you'll probably like this game. And I did this often, and in a lot of ways, you kind of make friends with people. And there was always this kind of like this clique of people that ended up being our quote unquote GameStop crew. And it was like we had obviously Sarah and myself, and you had like people like Derek and Patrick and Mike and Eric and Liz. And, we had like our customer-based people who were actually in the inner sanctum of that, which was like Jeff Shedlock, shout out to you. And then my guest today at this time, Andrew Puhr. How's it going?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. As I'm recounting, I just wanted to get in on this a little bit. So I don't really recall when you and I, like, officially became friends. I feel like in some sort of weird fucking fever dream, like you just were around all of a sudden and at all of our stuff. And I was cool with it because you and I really kind of always clicked. We nerded out about a lot of the similar things, and you definitely get me laughing in a lot of hilarious situations. So I just remember, like, maybe I would say the first, like, really solid gem memory I would have is, like, probably playing Guitar Hero or Rock Band in our old apartment that you were at.
Yeah, I definitely remember that. I remember you guys' place. It was like on, I think it was on Vermilion. It was like across from, like, I think a bank or something. If I remember right.
Yeah, right by the Wendy's there.
Yeah, I always remember because I always come in. I remember there being like a suit of armor, like in the corner, just kind of hanging out by your kitchen table.
That was Eric's, man, and that's a weird thing to recount. We moved Eric out of his house, and he temporarily lived with us, and that was one of the coolest things. Like when we first got that place, it was my first apartment ever. First time I'd ever moved away from home, and I was like, check this shit out. We got a fucking knight in shining armor, like hanging out in our kitchen. But we don't have a table. But we got this fucking knight in shining armor.
Right. I remember the place also had like a ton of, like, I feel like every time GameStop got, like, we're just going to, like, throw out the promotional material, just ended up at your place. Like cardboard signs and posters, and it just always ended up at your place, I feel like.
It's weird that you say that because that's very true. And actually I have fond memories of, like, I had the blue dragon cut out. That was cool. We had that at our band practices for a while, and I think something happened, water got on it or something and ruined it or whatever. And then actually at my dad's house, still in the room that I grew up in, I actually have the Halo 3 ODST standee, like, in my wall. Like, I put it onto and into my wall as, like, a permanent fixture. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I really liked that standee. But, you know, AP, you were always this guy that, like I said, you were always around. We were hanging out. We were being friendly. We were being friends with each other. Only a couple short years later, after I started working at GameStop, did I move away. And we decided we were going to do something else. I moved back to my dad's for a little bit. Got a job in Champaign. I didn't really see you, communicate with you often. Facebook wasn't really huge yet. You know, MySpace was dying, and I wasn't spending a lot of time doing that kind of stuff. But we kind of kept, you know, in contact here and there. And then I want to just, like, get right into the fat of this. Because fast forward, poof, to, like, late 2014, early 2015, probably. Does that sound right?
I remember Sarah was getting, like, a scrapbook together for, like, your birthday.
Okay.
I don't remember what birthday it was, but she had a scrapbook and she was, like, reaching out to people to, like, give it to, like, write a page of it or do something for a page of it to, like, give you as a surprise.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if you remember getting that gift.
I do. It was awesome. It was.
I don't remember what birthday it was. I think that's what began us kind of getting back in touch. Because, you know, like, I went to college and you had moved off and we kind of, like, fell out of contact for a little bit.
Yeah, man. We did fall out of contact a little bit, but then, like, ultimately we had, like, which was a really cool meeting. I will never, ever forget this. We met you in Elmhurst, Illinois. It was, like, February of 16, probably?
Yes.
Because it was around the time Deadpool had just recently come out. Like, maybe the end of February, last week or something?
Yeah, I think it was, like, end of February, beginning of March. It was somewhere right in there. I remember still being pretty cold out, and we had met up. And we both, like, I drove south, you guys drove north, and then we kind of met in the middle.
Yeah.
I just, like, went to that sushi place that was really good.
Oh, God, that place was delicious. We were catching up on life. It was, like, amazing because it was, like, this guy who I was friends with who, not by any, you know, like, purposeful meaning, had we fallen out of contact with. And, like, the universe was like, hey, it's cool because we can actually make this happen. He's a lot closer than you know. And that meeting was awesome because we ate the sushi and then we went to the candy store.
Oh, I remember that.
Man.
Sitting there rolling that fudge and that looked delicious.
The smells in that place were just incredible. They were just
that was great.
Super incredible. And then after that, we went and saw Deadpool. It was my second viewing. I think Sarah V and I had seen it the Valentine's Day weekend. It dropped maybe. And then when you and me and Sarah linked up, we saw it. And that theater was really cool because we were like maybe, three of five people there?
Yeah, I think it was like we had to wait around for a little bit before the show started. I remember it was like this really like old school theater, very like straight out of like I feel like the 70s. It was just had that kind of feel to it, and it had like this ornate art feel to like statues and it was very distinct. It doesn't look like all the cookie cutter like AMC's or IMAX theaters, all those ones that are they all look the same no matter which one you go to. This one had a lot of character to it. And it felt like a theater, like a one-screen theater you'd go to like 20 years ago.
It kind of is like the Lorraine in Hoopston, actually.
Yes.
It doesn't have obviously not the same quality, but that place is really cool because it had like the ramp up, the really long hallway that like is a slowly elevated thing to where all the different screens are. I really love that place. I would love to go back.
Yeah, we'll have to go there and actually maybe take the rest of the Foodies crew and do that. That would be a fun day.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. We should definitely plan that. That would be a blast to go into this. You know, Elmhurst is such a beautiful place too. I just want to mention, like, I don't know if that's the vibe you got when you were. I don't know how many times you had been to Elmhurst. That was our first time at the time.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
And it was just like, wow, these houses are really luxurious and beautiful, and the downtown is just really amazingly constructed. It looks really nice. I remember didn't we walk over to a Walgreens or some shit as well?
Yeah,
before?
you were pop hunting at the time.
Oh yeah, wow. That puts my perspective into perspective. Holy hell. It's weird because I think that was during like the start of the Great Transition that kind of has me where I'm at now in life, just working like a dog, getting all this network stuff going on and whatnot. But that night was really cool, and it was just like, at that moment, I was like, man, I'm so glad that I didn't lose a friend. Like, Poor Boy, as I had always called you, because I thought your last name was hilarious, and I don't really know also why that happened. I don't know if I was directly involved, but we just started calling you Poor Boy one day.
It was my Xbox gamer tag.
That's right. God, I knew it had to do something with something, but we loved it, and I just think that moniker has it stuck onto you for a long time on the Journey into Comics Network, and then during Foodies Season 1, you got like an unintentional rebrand where now you're just your initials, AP.
Right, and then it like caught up with like everyone else in the network only calls me AP now.
Yeah, it's weird because, and this is nothing personal to anybody, I just feel like a lot of the actual, not you included obviously, a lot of the people in my life who I've known who were named Andrew were kind of shitty people. So I don't want to call you that because it reminds me of shitty people, and I'm like, man, like, Poor Boy, AP, whatever you want to call yourself, you're just such an awesome dude. I have to give you some sort of special moniker that lets you know that, like, you're on my level, and I love it. Like, you're a hilarious person, and I like having you around, obviously. That's why I was like, hey, start a fucking show.
Right.
But,
So
go ahead, sorry.
So I remember when you like you were reaching out, because like I think also like our Facebook messaging between each other just started blowing up when you started, like, you brought up this idea about the Foodies podcast that you were working on with Veronica and this other guy who I don't think I ever actually met.
No, you didn't, and his role quickly diminished just because of the person he is and his personality and whatnot. And it was hilarious because as soon as his, like, interest diminished, I still have it, by the way, in Dropbox. You can still see it. You sent a movie show idea sheet. Like, you had come up with a bunch of ideas. A lot of the concepts I love. We need to actually start implementing some of them. If you look back and you're just like, wow, man, you had some great concepts. And it was like, man, this guy wants it. It was weird. You had like this, I don't know if you were just like having fun, wanted to be included in something different. I don't know what your motives were, but it was really neat because as soon as you started to really show interest in Foodies, it was like we were ready for episode 1. We had you on episode 1, and we kind of were just getting the... Doing podcasting is not just, what's the best way to say this, AP? Doing podcasting is not just something that you're automatically familiar with. It definitely takes some sort of changing of your own self-mind, I guess, to let yourself go to that place where you're open, free thought without worrying that the light is red. I know some people, as soon as the light gets red, their hands get shaky. They're like, oh my gosh, people are going to hear what I'm saying.
Right.
And I'm not super concerned with that. So as soon as you and me and V kind of started really meshing together, and we only did a couple episodes on that first season of Foodies, and we're going to definitely dive deeper into a lot of this stuff today, just to let you know. But just as like a kind of a start of the general overview, you doing Foodies led to me going, well, this guy knows enough to be able to hold his own, and I think you are an intelligent enough person, and you have a bright perspective on things, a very sharp perspective, if you will, that to have you be able to host your own show and you can make it whatever you want. I told you, I was like, look, if you're interested, make you the show whatever you want, and we're going to lead up to this because I want to know the real genuine backstory behind this. You create the Poor Report for the Journey into Comics Network. That is an every Tuesday show. You you do an episode every week now, which is amazing. You went from a bi-weekly show, uncertain if you would last a few episodes, to now just flourishing, and it's awesome. But let's go all the way back to the very, 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 very beginning of this part of your story, man. Let's go to the part of the story I don't know. We are friends in 2007, 2008, 2009-ish, and then you went off to college. I want you to really fill me in on your college years as a whole, because I will say the AP Poor Boy I knew before you left for college to the guy who I'm friends with now, there's not a huge difference, I would say. Like, you're pretty much the same guy, but it seems you're a little bit more relaxed in your own skin. And I want to kind of talk about you being in college and kind of actually get the backstory because I don't know it.
Yeah. So like I said, I went to Bradley University, which was in Peoria, which is I guess like 2 hours from Danville at the time. So it was like nice. I chose it because it was close enough to home that I could go home on like a weekend or a night if I really had to, but it's far enough away that I don't feel obligated to. It was something that like I thought going in, like it's nice that I can be kind of my own person. I don't have to feel, because like if I went to like U of I or another school close to home, it would have made more sense like financially and responsibly to like just commute. And that point, you're not really getting the college experience. It'd be like the same as like going to DAC or something like that. And I guess for those listeners who don't know, DAC was the community college in Danville.
Yeah, and you get that you're shackled by your parents because you're not spreading your wings for the first time away from them.
Right. And I thought that's something like everyone needs to do at some point. Like, you really can't go from like living with your parents to like a wife or a partner. You can't really like jump from A to B. You need kind of that like space where you can kind of figure out who you are outside of everyone else in your life, like who you are kind of as a whole, and like getting a chance to like go off to college and be relatively unknown at first, because I went to a college that not a lot of people from my high school went to. Like there was like one person, he'd graduated like 2 years ahead of me, so we had no connections. So I remember like going to college and like parents dropping you off, and you have that like sense of like you almost are like just sad, because it just feels like a part of your life is ended, and like you're no longer have like a safety net, and you feel on your own. And then like you go through and you have to like force yourself to make new friends. You can't rely on the friends you've had for years to kind of carry you through it. So it really forced you to kind of bring you out of your shell. And then I made the decision kind of during that whole like welcome week, that whole introduction to college, to check out what this Greek life thing was about. I saw like flyers, and there were like people kind of walking around campus. So I said, I'm just gonna do it. I might not like it, but I'll just say I did it. It's kind of something to like check out the list, and went through. And there's a lot of people that are like very stereotypical fraternity people, like the ones you see in like movies or on TV, like Animal House type guys that you run into, and you're like, no, it's not really what I'm about. And then like I found a fraternity that was a lot like me at the time. We had a lot of the same interest. It wasn't like super sporty guys. It wasn't like guys who only cared about like drinking and whatnot. It was a very good group of guys that I'd found, and I was like, sure, I'll try this out. If worst comes to worst, I don't like it, I can quit. It's not a huge deal. But when doing that, I kind of opened myself up, because like with my pledge class, I ended up with like 10 guys that I got to know really well and became friends with, and some that I'm still friends with today, which is really nice to have, even though we've all kind of moved to other areas, or some were up in the suburbs where I am now, some are different states. It's just kind of one of those things where you can still keep in touch now, which has been nice. And it really kind of allowed me, because you do things with that kind of group of guys that you wouldn't do if you're in that position on your own.
Yeah, man. It's funny because, in discovering you as a person a little bit deeper, today finding out you were a part of a fraternity was really interesting. And I am curious to know, I'm guessing that, you said it's not like Animal House. It wasn't really frat boy, if you will, the bros, Chad Bro Chill 21, if you will. But what was that experience like, joining a fraternity? Did you have an initiation? What's that like, if that's the case? I feel like there's maybe like a million questions loaded within this one microcosm of a subject, for me at least.
Yeah, at least from my experience, kind of going through the fraternity, like the pledging process is not like what you'd see in like Animal House. Like no one got nicknamed Flounder. There's not crazy haze or anything like that. It's just kind of, a lot of the stuff was done just to get to know all the other people in the house. Like we did like something called like interviews. So you would go, you'd have like a composition notebook, and you'd go and just interview the upperclassmen in the house, the people that weren't like in your immediate pledge class. You'd ask them questions like, where are you from? What's your major, hobbies, interests, all that stuff. And just to kind of get to them. The whole idea behind that was that you just got to not see these guys as upperclassmen and keep yourself closed off or just limited to your specific pledge class at the time. So it was something that like allowed you, and it was more or less like a facilitator to get you to keep conversing. And I know one thing I did, because sometimes when I get into something that I know I need to do, I'll kind of I'll go hard at it, and I'll just like devote all my time and I'll rush and get it done, and then I'll kind of move on. And that was something, excuse me, that was something that kind of messed me up initially, was that like I got through like all of my interviews in like 2 weeks when some of the other guys in my pledge class took like month and a half or so. So I was just like, well, I got this done, and then I wasn't really talking to people. They're like, hey, you're supposed to keep talking to them after you get this thing checked off your list. But I was kind of like looking at it like a to-do list. And I was just done. Oh, well, I'm done now. All right, moving on.
It sounds to me like that was a point in your life where maybe the list of doing things was more a distraction for you, and less a thing that you like, an objective. It seems to me that was almost like you knew as long as you stayed busy doing something, you weren't thinking about the changes you were going through in life. As people, we're very sensitive creatures, and change can drastically affect you. I mean, when we moved up to Highland, and I took my job at Horseshoe Casino, and I mean, that's everything changes because of that place. At the time, it was literally devastating to me, and it was a choice I made for myself. I decided I don't want to be stuck in Central Illinois for the rest of my life. I want to start experiencing more of the world, and made this decision with Sarah to move here. And doing that was the hardest thing. I was leaving my family behind. I was leaving relationships and friendships I had built for many, many years. I didn't know what the landscape was going to be like. I was literally thrusting myself into a whole new world of people who I didn't have any fucking clue about. And in turn, it was the greatest decision ever, and it shaped so much of my life that it's just like, I'm grateful now. So to me, to just wrap back to you, it just really does seem like this was you laser focused. Like, I have a task. As long as I'm busy on the task, my brain doesn't have to wander.
Right. It was one of those things that like I've self-diagnosed myself with this, is that I have enthusiastic ADD.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's like something like you find something you're really interested in, and you just put all your energy and all your focus and all your time into completing that activity, and then you kind of move on to the next thing and to the next thing. That was something like I think all through college, because I really wanted to kind of stretch myself, but like cause myself to grow in a way that I would use. So I got involved with like different organizations on campus, and it got to a point that like as I was like sort of ending my time in school, I could walk through campus and run into like a dozen or more people that I would know that none of them would know each other. It was because I put myself in these different groups throughout campus that all had through different interests. Like I had my like engineering friends, and I had like my friends from like religious stuff that I had done on campus, and I was on student government and just like stuff like that just allowed me to kind of get involved in different groups and see people from different backgrounds that I wouldn't meet if I'd stuck to one thing, or if I kind of just did it for the school. I wasn't into like the whole college atmosphere.
Man, that's cool. You kind of unintentionally position yourself as 6 degrees of Andrew Puhr. You know, you got people on Bradley's campus who don't know each other, but by association they do because they know you. And that's interesting because you did get busy with so many things. Did you notice yourself at a point like, wow, this is so outside of my comfort zone. When did I become this person?
Yeah, I remember, I think the most interesting thing, I think that it didn't click to me until someone had said it. I was at this kind of retreat thing for one of the organizations I was involved with. And I said to like someone that was in charge, because they're asking about like different personalities, I said, "Oh, I'm an introvert," and he looked at me like, "No, you're not. Like, what are you talking about?" Like, it hadn't clicked on me that like, because I was a lot more introverted in high school, and I think through everything I did in college, my personality, I became a lot more extroverted and kind of a lot more outgoing, at least in certain aspects of my life, and when I feel comfortable with a group of people, and I become so comfortable with so many different groups that it kind of started altering my personality, so to speak.
Interesting. I think that is super interesting. So, what happens? I guess another part of the story with your college is, what did you actually like go to major in?
Yeah, because throughout high school, I always liked math and science, and I was in this pre-engineering program that Danville High School was implementing right as I went into high school. So I was like, okay, I want to pursue engineering. It sounds like something I would be good at. I'm good at these subjects in high school, and it was kind of just narrowing it down to what it was that I would, because there's a ton of different engineering fields. And some schools that are more strictly engineering have dozens and dozens of fields you can choose from. But I chose mechanical engineering, which was, I feel like, the broadest of the field, because you can take that major and you can focus on design. You can work in like biomedical stuff. You can work in like nuclear energy and all. There's a bunch of different stuff you can do. You're not tied to like civil engineers typically do structures and buildings and all that stuff, or electrical is all electronics and computers and all that. So it was just something I felt that had like the broadest and the most opportunities. And it was something that was nice because I've always liked the design aspect of engineering more than like working with like engines. It's always fun. I've always liked to see something that I can bring together from an idea to something tangible. I always thought that was kind of interesting.
Huh, it's really cool. It sounds like deciding that you wanted to get your degree in mechanical engineering was essentially like you deciding to take the jack-of-all-trades degree for what you wanted your field to be, so that you had the ability to kind of swing open any door you wanted and walk through that sumbitch, because you're a very smart dude. I mean, genuinely, you are a very intelligent mind. So to say that you design and do things now with your job, and we'll get to that in a bit, it is just baffling. So at what point in college, while you're getting this mechanical engineering degree, do you decide that radio is a thing for you? Because we've not even wrapped to that first question yet of where the original Pour Rapport version 1.0 comes from. How do you get involved in radio? It's just right now in your story, I'm very confused.
Yeah, it was another one of those things that like it sounded interesting. Maybe I'll give it a shot, kind of thing. It was one of those like I think I had a friend or somebody I knew that had like a show also on the radio, on the campus radio, which is like I can walk there from my dorm in like 5 minutes, kind of thing. And it was I think him and his buddy did like a sports talk radio, and I was like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. Do they have like it's like, oh yeah, they run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can lock in an hour or a half hour slot or whatever you feel comfortable doing. And all they ask is that you like, even if you don't show up, like if you have something comes up, there's a setup that like if the like clock hits your showtime, like you turn off this like not quite music, but it's like preset music that'll play on the station to fill all the gaps from all the shows. Okay. Just there's never dead air between everything.
Makes sense, yeah.
So I remember just I was like, oh, that would be fun, just to kind of something that I could say I've done. It's like, because I've been on like the radio before for things I did like growing up, like through theater and so like that. I know we'll talk about that later. But when I found, I was like, so I just like kind of emailed the person that was in charge of the broadcasting and like having all the people, the person you contact you with like what times they have available, what time you'd be interested in, and like they kind of give you like free range. Like you get like an orientation that shows you like how to use the board, and here's the microphone, here's the door code to access the office that all the equipment's in. Here's like a bunch of music you can choose from. You can bring your computer and play whatever you want off of that. So it was one of those shows like I kind of did some like pre-planning, and I thought of something like, it was the same reason that I came up with the show The Pour Rapport. Now, I liked the TV show The Colbert Report. I liked that both of our names kind of have that or sound. And because I was like, oh, it's like poor rapport. It rhymes. It sounds interesting. I remember I actually got to use this when I started doing those special episodes. At one point, it was going to be called just The Report, but with my name instead of like the PORT part. But I looked at it and I just didn't like how it looked. I don't think people would know how to pronounce it. And I feel like I'd spend more time explaining if that was my main show than if I just did The Poor Rapport. So like I think I came up with the name pretty early on because I think I spent like a couple days trying to like think of what to call the show. And like I wanted something that was unique to me and not like, oh, who does that show? I wanted there to be like no question going in. Because if it was like The Report or The Report Tonight, no one knows anyone can host that show. But The Poor Report has to be me or at least someone with my name.
See, you're good at marketing. You were thinking ahead. That must have been a nerve-wracking thing. Like you decide, fuck it, I'll try radio, whatever, and then now you kind of have put an unnecessary stress on you. That is kind of your like college years, is that you just put yourself in these situations consistently, it seems. So how did the first show doing the original version of Poor Rapport go? Which, by the way, predates Journey into Comics by a couple years.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how. I think I remember just sitting there, like before I play. I think I came up with like a handful of songs that I liked. That I was like, oh, this would be good. I think I just had them already on my computer as just songs I normally listen to. But there's not really restrictions on what you could or couldn't play. Like you couldn't play, like you could play explicit music. You could play whatever. There wasn't as much restriction because it was a campus radio. It wasn't like the main stations for the city. So it wasn't something like no one's just going to like happen to just stumble upon your station.
Okay.
And I mean, I guess we had the website allowed streaming. So like you could listen to that. They had like a live stream that you could like tap into from your computer at home or whatever. So that had more opportunities, but it wasn't something like there was very few restrictions on it. It was a lot more freeform, which is I think it's just a lot of college campuses are. They don't try to restrict you and especially in that kind of medium where it's kind of putting yourself out there to begin with. So I remember kind of being overwhelmed because like you're just sitting by yourself in a room that's trying to think of a good size comparison because it has all like the sound dampening foam insulation. You could stare at like a rack of like old cassette tapes and CDs and records and I feel like you're in a room that because it was the building where all these offices were was a converted dorm, so they're about the size of a dorm room, which aren't particularly big to begin with. Like you kind of open the door and there's the main desk with the board and everything on it and the microphone. And I remember like what you'd said like when we started talking, like when that red light comes on, there's that initial anxiousness that like what I'm saying is out there now. Like there's no taking it back. Especially with like radio, you can't just like stop, edit it, put it back out there. It's not something you can do. Radio is once you say it, it's out there. You could say the worst thing and there's no taking it back.
Yeah, what was that like for you doing like live radio from the jump?
It was, I think, a little overwhelming at first until I kind of got to the point where realizing that it was, since I didn't have a co-host, I didn't have a guest, it was just me by myself in a room. I almost felt like I was just conversing I was talking to someone on the other end that whoever they are cares about what I have to say. So I kind of kept everything light and easygoing, and I played a lot of music. And there's sometimes like where you wouldn't really have anything too exciting to say between songs. You'd come back and you'd say that was this song by this band. One of my favorites, get like a short little bit about that, and then now coming up next, we're doing this song. I cannot remember any of the songs I played. I remember I had a Valentine's Day episode, and I found just a ton of different love songs and just played those with like maybe like 1 minute gap of me talking between them.
Interesting. Was that dedicated to anyone at the time, or was that just like a Valentine's Day episode you kind of had to throw together because it was Valentine's Day and you had the slot?
Yeah, I wasn't interested in anyone at that time. It was still, I think I was getting over someone, and I just kind of wanted to not really think about it. So that's why I just kind of kept it all about the music. I didn't really want to feel like talking. Didn't want to do like dealing with anyone around this show or like around the music. I was like, just the music today. I'm not feeling like giving a speech or talking about Valentine's Day in any way whatsoever.
All right, so I'm going to kind of jump around here. I want to kind of future trip. When the last episode of your show that you were doing for this local college radio station happens, what was that like? Did you remember? I mean, were you aware going in like, this is it? It's the last time I'm going to do this. Last time the Poor Rapport is going to be a thing.
I don't think I knew at the time it was going to be my last episode. It was just the last one for the school year. Like, come like end of May, like finals are happening, classes are winding down. The network's not really, or like the radio station's not really going to be a thing over the summer. It kind of just runs on its own. There's not a whole lot going on there because obviously there's no students around. So I remember like, I think I remember signing off for the last time that year. I think I said like, I'll be back next year because it was like my last year was like I did a 5 years at Bradley for my degree just because engineering takes that long. And it was the end of my first senior year, so to speak. So I remember like signing off and I was like, I'll be back next year maybe at a new time, maybe on a new day. And then kind of signed off. And I never went back to it that fall. It was kind of one of those things that like college really got in the way. Like that last year I was busy with my senior project and everything else. And it was just, I didn't have the time to commit to a show. Like my last year at Bradley was a lot of refocusing my time and I had kind of stretched myself in so many ways at one point. I needed to kind of contract to focus on like doing what I came to the school to do, which was work on my studies, get my degree, finish all that up. And my senior project took countless hours on top of my already pretty extensive schoolwork. So I didn't have a lot of time to be as involved as I had been all my previous years at the school.
It's crazy. And then to think that many years later, we would sit down and discuss bringing your show back in a totally different format, obviously. It's funny to me because I guess I didn't realize how much music was involved in that show versus what your show is now and how that's like almost a total departure. Because it's not like on that show you were covering a lot of news topics. Plus, it was in like kind of the golden years of the USA. We weren't constantly at someone's throat, so to speak.
Right. I think I think right when I did it, it would have been right after Obama. It was during the end of Obama's first term, going into his second, was when I was doing that show. So yeah, it was definitely in a pretty good time period.
Yeah, so what...
Definitely probably wouldn't have been a lot of political news or any news like that to really talk about. It was kind of business as usual.
Yeah, well said. So I guess the next logical question in all of this is, while you're in school, you meet someone who is very important to you. And here's a really interesting fact. I know very little about this person, so I'm going to let you take me to where you guys met, how this all started, kind of guide me through, because this is the next thing that is happening in your college years. You're meeting a very important person in your time stream.
Right. And I actually ended up meeting this person while I was still doing my show. It was during that like late spring that I had met her. But I'll kind of go back to kind of how all this stuff had to fall into place to make even meeting this person happen.
A story of fate. I love it.
Yeah. So this goes back to my freshman year. So, which is interesting because this person's 3 years younger than me. So when I was a freshman, they weren't even in college yet. So it's very interesting. So when I was a freshman in the dorm, I had signed up. There was an activities fair. That's what they usually do as freshmen, where like all these organizations have tables set up in the main quad, and you go through and you pick up flyers and you sign. You sign your name, put your email down to like get more information about the clubs. You kind of go to ones that sound interesting. So one of the clubs I signed up for, they came by, like two of the people involved had came by to talk to me about it. And I ended up going to that organization, started to get to know those people. And those girls happened to be in a sorority. And so by the time I'd gone Greek, and there was this whole thing that they do on at least on my college campus, was that guys can go essentially be bus boys at a sorority house. So like, because sorority houses, unlike fraternity houses, have their like lunches and dinners prepared for them. Like when you live in that house, like you essentially have a meal plan you pay for, and you get like breakfast food available, and then you get like lunch and dinner made by the cook or whoever is in charge of doing that. But since obviously they don't have like a staff that they hire to go in and like do dishes and put food away and all that, they have fraternity guys come do that, and they do that in exchange for you get a free meal, and then you sit and talk with the girls during lunch and dinner. You do like a few meals a week for that. So these two girls I'd met my freshman year after I had joined my fraternity, and towards the end of that school, were like, hey, would you be interested in doing this? So I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. Sounds like a way to save money, get to know some more people. So I had agreed to do that. So and I ended up being a houseboy is what it was called, at this sorority house for the rest of my time at Bradley. So starting with my sophomore year and going until I graduated. So I had been a fixture there, and I'd been like the longest serving houseboy there by the time I had met this person. So it was kind of one of those things that if I didn't sign up for that club at the activities fair my freshman year, wouldn't have met those girls. The girls wouldn't have asked me if I was interested in doing this, and I wouldn't have done it and enjoyed it and stuck with it for a few years. I would probably have never met this person. So it was kind of nice because this person, when she was a freshman, towards the end of that career, she got the position of house manager at her sorority, which is like you're in charge of like working with the house boys and doing stuff for the house and scheduling. So like she reached out to me via email. I think I still have this email somewhere. I'm bad about deleting emails. So somewhere buried in my old email account, there's this email that's like, hey, my name is Liz. I'm the house manager. Like send me your availability so I can find like 3 or 4 meals for you to work during the week. And I like sent an email back, and it was very responsive, and it was just like anyone else that like sent me an email. And then what ended up happening is kind of a interesting course of events, which is a little weird to talk about now, but I ended up kind of dating her roommate, which is
okay.
It didn't work out. Like we were just very different people, but like I think we'd met through something, so like we went on like a couple of dates, and it really wasn't going anywhere. And she was actually kind of dating someone in my fraternity, so like we had both matched up close, but not close enough to the people that we were meant to be with, which was pretty interesting. And like I remember there was a whole thing of she like things with her and the guy weren't really working out, and she was coming to me because I got to know me over the course of that year, and I was kind of more of like the friend that she could talk to, and I would give advice because I'm a very like supportive person to my friends when they're like going through some problems. That was kind of how I was, and we had talked, and like then like the school year ended, they had ended and all that, and then like over the summer we were just kind of casually talking back and forth, and because we both like she lived up in the Chicago suburbs and I was living in Danville over the summer between the school years because I had like an internship. So we had talked, and over the summer we started getting to know each other a lot better and getting that kind of each other's histories, and I started finding myself that I was really liking this girl. And I remember, I don't know, we didn't really get in a fight, but I think something that I said or something got misconstrued, and we had like a small falling out over the summer while we were talking. And I remember I wrote up this whole letter that was like basically saying like how much I've enjoyed getting to know you this year, and I'm starting to like you, and I'd like to see kind of where this goes. And like I sent a letter, and I was like basically like if you're not interested, I completely understand. If this turns you off, so be it. But it's better to like take risks than forever be friend zoned or something like that. And I sent it, and then she read it, and like we talked about it, and like she had agreed with me. And I guess the reason like she got mad was she thought that I wasn't interested, or this whole thing. We were still both pretty young back then, so it kind of went like we didn't want to like start dating while we aren't actually seeing each other in person. We're just like talking on the phone and texting, and so like we waited till we got back in the fall, and we started going on dates. I think I remember actually before we went back to school, I drove up from Danville to her place, like her parents' house, which was like 3.5 hours. I drove up on like a Friday night. We got dinner. Like we watched the movie Case 39, which I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Never seen it.
It's a horror movie with like a young Bradley Cooper, and I can't remember the actress's name, but it's like involves a girl that's adopted and people all their fears on. It's definitely not a first date movie, but we both really enjoyed it, and it was a good date. And then like obviously I was like 20, what was it? I was 22 and like she was 19. So like end of the day, I just drove. My brother was still living. He was living in like I think Naperville at the time. So like I drove to his place, spent the night, and then drove back in the morning. Like I couldn't sleep over. That's not a thing that happens after a first date.
Yeah. Moving a little quick.
Yeah, that'd be a little ridiculous. And her parents would not have been okay with that. They were still uncertain why, like their technically still teenage daughter was talking to a guy of drinking age who was like a senior at school. It was definitely, but like it took them to like get to know me and realize like, oh, he's not who we thought he was going to be based on like pure details about like my age, year in school, all that. Like outside of those details, they got to get to know me, and I was like, oh, he's a really nice guy, and like it wasn't a big deal. So it's like we're going to, so as we get back, we started dating when we got back to school, and then it kind of just, well, from that we had a year in school where we were both together, and then I had graduated, so I went back to Danville, and she still had, I think it was 2 more years at school. So we had to do the long distance thing. So I was shuttling to Peoria like every like couple weeks for like the weekend and stuff, and all like the big stuff that she had like in her sorority, like formals and like date parties and stuff like that. So we did the long distance thing for a couple years. We had to do just a lot of the phone calls and texting, and it's actually a funny story. Like I didn't have texting when we started like talking. Like I remember I racked up like an $80 phone bill because I was sending texts, and it's like 10 cents a text.
Oh no.
So, and like I was still on my parents' plan, so my dad got the bill, and that was like, all right, we're going unlimited texting. I paid him for whatever the extra was, and then it was all fine. But I remember her kind of freaking out because of the bill, and she wanted to make sure that like my parents liked her and this whole thing. And we're both very kind of watchful of what people think. We don't like people to be mad at us, and it's kind of one of the things we have in common. So we start like as like we're going through the whole long distance things, because I was stuck at Danville because a scholarship I got while I was at Bradley, they paid for a nice chunk of my tuition in exchange for 2 years of working in like Vermilion County. So I got a job at Watchfire, and I was working there just to kind of fulfill my commitment, even though it was something that was I was kind of overqualified for, because it was essentially like installation, electronic-based tech support. So it was a lot of time I had a headset on. I was doing phone communication. I was going through people's computers to kind of solve problems for them. But I had a mechanical engineering degree. It really wasn't something that like I saw myself doing. So like I was paid pretty well for the level of stuff I was doing, but I wasn't challenged. I wasn't really doing what I went to school for. So kind of as soon as my 2-year commitment up, I started like shooting out job applications, and it made sense that since Liz was going to be going back home after she had graduated until like she found a job and stuff, that it made sense to look in the suburbs. So I started looking around, and I got an interview for a company up in the suburbs, and I drove up there, thought I had a good interview. It didn't end up going well. Like 2 weeks later, I had another interview for the job I currently have, and I remember getting along really well with the guys in the interview, and we had some negotiations, and everything worked out. And then, like, basically I signed, like, my agreement to take the job, and I had 2 weeks to take my whole life and move it 3.5 hours away.
Oh boy.
Been
there. How did that go for you?
It was weird because, like, I was moving, like, because, like, I went to, while I was in college, I had, I went from living in the dorms to living in my fraternity house. And I lived there, like, the rest of the time at school, and I had one room completely to myself that was meant for 2 people. So I had a lot of space, and I utilized that space completely. I acquired items. I, like, had my books and my movies, and I had all my stuff. And then when I graduated, I had to stuff all of that back into my childhood room. So, like, I had like no floor space and no space on my walls. It was becoming a little cumbersome. Like, I literally had a bookcase that was, like, next to my bed where you couldn't see, like, the bottom 2 shelves of it because they had books on it, but because my bed was right against it.
You were a little crammed.
Yeah, it was kind of like I had stretched out, and I was kind of forced to be kind of constricted in there. And I did that for 2 years. I had stuff like in the attic at my parents' place, and stuff that was just crammed in my bedroom, kind of wherever it could fit. And I was able to pack all that stuff up in 2 weeks and then do that leave. And the thing is, like, while I didn't know how long this process was going to take, so I didn't really, like, break the news to my parents that, like, hey, I'm looking for a job. I'm probably going to be moving out soon. So it all kind of happened within, like, a month of me starting looking for a job that I found this job. So I had to, like, break the news to my parents, which is a really awkward conversation to have. It's like, hey, I got a job, I'm leaving. The conversation, like, oh, okay. And it was weird. Like, I had to, like, drive up to find an apartment. Like, I drove up, like, the weekend after I accepted the job to look at apartments, found one, sent in, like, all that, like, application work for an apartment and get approval and all that stuff you have to go through when you get an apartment. And then, like, that next weekend after that, I had to move my whole life. So I had a U-Haul trailer, and I still had to work those 2 weeks because I had a job. I had to give my 2 weeks notice. So, like, at night, I'm just sitting there packing boxes and figuring out what to do and ordering a U-Haul and all this stuff. And since my dad's retired, like, all my stuff just started filling up the living room. And then my dad went and picked up the U-Haul and just loaded all my stuff into it for me. So, like, I came home from, like, work one day, and there's just all of my stuff in the U-Haul.
You were just like...
I was like, oh, here you go. And it wasn't like get out. It was just like my dad was bored. He enjoys packing and organizing, and he just did all of this work for me. I'm like, how'd you move that giant bookcase by yourself? And he just did it, just flipped it one arm, stuffed it into the U-Haul truck. And then, like, I drove up on that, like, Saturday, like, had that job start on Monday. So on Saturday, I'm driving up with the U-Haul with my mom. So my dad had, like, a work thing or meeting, or he had something that he had to do. But we were driving up, taking, like, these back roads because it's really difficult to take, like, a U-Haul trailer on the highways. It just gets a little cumbersome, and there's a lot of, like, wind resistance, and it's just easier to go all these back ways. So it was like taking Route 1 and going up all these side streets with it. And I get there, and, like, we unload everything in the U-Haul trailer. There's still stuff like the back of my dad's truck that I was driving. And then we go to drop the U-Haul trailer off. And then as we're driving, my dad's truck's water pump just goes out.
Oh, no.
Luckily, like, I had, like, just pulled into, like, the U-Haul place, which also happened to be, like, a mechanic shop. So it was, like, very convenient. But, like, we were, like, 30 minutes after they had closed.
Oh, no.
But there's, like, guy is still there, and like the guy like knocks on the door and is like, "Hey, you dropping off?" I was like, "Yeah, but I think something's wrong with the truck. Can you take a look?" And he looks down and just sees like water just kind of falling out of the truck, and he's like, "Yeah, it looks like your pump's out. You were closed. Is there any chance like you can come back tomorrow?" I give this whole story like I gotta get my mom back. She has to like work tonight. This is my only vehicle here. Like I just moved here, and I give this whole story. Like they agreed to work for it. Like their mechanic and the guy there agreed to like get this fixed up for me. So I remember just like leaving the truck there with like half of my life in the trunk or in like the back end of the truck, and like just left it there and like walked across the street to like a restaurant to hang out for a few hours while they did the work on it.
Well,
I was just like,
okay, so I want to ask this question. You have half your life in the back of this truck. Were you like super nice at the end and like gave him a few extra dollars, or how did that exchange go? It's weird because with mechanics, I feel like mechanics get a bad rap a lot of times. People are like, "Man, fucking mechanics, they just tell me that all my shit's broken and try to charge me too much money." And then every time I've had an experience with a mechanic in an emergency situation, kind of like what you're talking about, it seems like mechanics have like the biggest hearts on earth. They're like, oh, well, I can help you out. This is only a couple hours of work. You're going to pay me, so it's a win-win. How did that go for you?
like yeah, they were so nice. Like I think we gave like a nice tip, and then like I talked to my dad, and he was like, "You should come by like in a day or two and like bring him like a 6-pack or something or a case or something like that." And like so like we did that, and then like I remember like every time like my car needed anything done, I'd go back to that same place just because they had done so much for me. It seemed nice just to keep like bringing them business.
Yeah.
Because like they had really helped me. Like that day could have gone so south. Like if either they had been closed and no one had been there, when I pulled up, I would have probably tried to like keep driving to find the next place and could have done ungodly damage to that vehicle. So it was very much definitely a day that could have been bad. That really they really came through for me. They got it done really quick. They had a part they had to order, but they got it delivered like real quick. They had like a guy on a truck through like I don't know if it was through like I can't remember the name of the like auto part company. I don't think it was like AutoZone, but it was like something like that, one of those guys. And I remember they had like guy in the truck bring it in, and they got it on and replaced like the water pump and the belt and everything, and good to go. So I was able to get the rest of my stuff unloaded and then like get in the car and then drive my mom back to Danville so I could drop my dad's truck off, pick up my car, pick up my dog, and then drive back the next morning.
Oh my Lord.
So I put go ahead.
How late did that put you getting back to Danville? Because that's a long drive late at night.
Yeah, I think it was like just after 12 when everything happened. I think we got everything done with the truck. They had it all fixed, I think, by like 4. We unloaded the rest of the stuff in the truck, just like basically set it in the door, and then like left and got in at like 9 or so back into Danville. So it was a crazy day, like leaving like first thing in the morning and did all of that, had all of that, and then got back to Danville by like 9 that night. So it was quite a day.
No fun.
Yeah. And then like driving back and having that thing of like having to go to like a town that you've barely seen. Like you just found it because it was close to your job. You didn't really do a ton of research going into it. And then all your stuff's just sitting there leaning against a wall or in tons of boxes. And you're just like, you start just to go through and try and place things and kind of start to put your life like the way you want it, and kind of having the first time you can really control the space. Like you don't have to do things just because that's the way you're used to doing it. You can like, oh, I want to put this here. I want to do this differently, and just kind of make the place your own. Because like when you're obviously when you're at your parents' house, it's kind of pretty well set the way it's going to look. When you're in college, a lot of your furniture is a fixture that doesn't move, and so it's the first time like you have an empty canvas to kind of decorate as you wish.
You're like, fuck it, I'm putting my bed in the kitchen.
Like, really? There was actually at my apartment there was I got my carpeting replaced in my bedroom, so there was a time where my bed was in my living room.
Oh, that's actually kind of awesome. So I have a question that we haven't really kind of gone back to. The missus, you moved closer to her now.
Yes.
How does now you've changed the dynamic of your relationship? Have you guys at the time did you guys consider moving in together? Is that not a step? I guess I don't know. I'm not really well versed in what what steps you guys are taking in this journey together. But you moved closer to her. What she had to have been stoked.
Yeah, it was one of those things like if I'm gonna move for work, it doesn't make sense to move further away. Like it didn't make sense to like look in like Indiana or look in like Ohio or it didn't make sense to do that. If I knew like she still had school to wrap up, she wasn't going anywhere. And obviously it didn't like we weren't gonna rush anything, and that's not kind of how our parents were. Our parents are very traditional, like don't really live together till you're married, that whole thing. Like it wasn't something like that wasn't gonna be our next step as I'm gonna move and she's gonna graduate and then join me wherever I was.
Okay.
So it was kind of one of those. I felt like, obviously, if I hadn't found the job or there was opportunities up here, but it's a big enough area and there's a lot of companies that I was going to find something. It's just a matter of time. And I remember finding it, and I didn't even realize how close it was to her when I applied. Because I think I stayed at her parents' house because like she was still at school, so like it was just her parents there. And I remember staying there, like I think I stayed the night before. I stayed over just so I could make my morning interview. And I didn't have to do like a 3.5 hour drive from Danville to go into an interview. Like, that's not how you started. That's not how you go into an interview. You'd be exhausted.
Yeah, it would definitely make for a long day. Like, oh, your interview's at 9. Good luck hopping in your car at 5:30 in the morning, which means if you want to get ready, you should probably be up by 4. Oh, wait. Right. You live a regular life and don't typically go to bed till 12. Enjoy being fucked.
Yeah, that was one of those things. Like, and it'd be like dressed up and sitting in a car dressed up for, like, it would just be a nightmare.
It sounds overall like a nightmare, and I kind of totally appreciate that part of your story because similar to you, the horseshoe situation, ending up working up here was very similar. I had to go do an audition. I actually had to take a math test. Super legit, and do all this stuff and didn't even live here. And then like it was this like, oh well, we aren't gonna actually tell you who made it to who actually is gonna get into our class until next week, or until the next day, I think it was. So we had to actually stay at Sarah's parents and until the next morning when I had to go back for them to say, yes, you made it, you're in our class, here's when you start.
Right. And you might have to correct me, but wasn't Sarah already living up in Indiana before you had got this job?
Yeah, there was actually interesting parallel to your story. There was a time where I was in Hoopston, Sarah was in Highland, and we were a long-distance relationship, making it work, and her driving down on weekends or me driving up on weekends. Or there was actually a point in time where Sarah was teaching piano students in Danville and in Highland. She had students during the week in Danville and taught at the studio on Saturdays in Highland. So it was super, I totally understand the long distance thing and how it can actually evolve a relationship in a really positive way and help you to better be communicative and to, know the idiosyncrasies of your partner.
Right. You have to compensate for, you're not spending quality physical, like in-person time together. So you have to like, getting us through talking, you get to know each other. And like once you get past all of the like how was your day or what happened like this week and stuff, like you're getting deeper because there's nothing else left to talk about. So you just kind of you keep learning more and more about each other, like stuff that like you wouldn't think to bring up when you're in the next room cooking or watching TV. It forces you to be more present because it's easy like when you're living together or like in the same place is that you can live separately more. Like you could be doing one thing and she'll be in another room doing something else. But like when you're in the long distance things, when you're there together, you have undivided attention really on the other person.
Yeah, you're like, everything else, shut the fuck up. It's time to party. Like, let's spend some time. You and me get away from the world. That's awesome. So we're going to fast forward while we still kind of backtrack. I promise I kind of have a goal here. So you moved up to this neck of the woods, and then, you know, the significant other is finishing college or just finished college?
Yeah, I moved in, it's actually coming about 2 years now. I moved in November, and then she graduated in December of that year. So there was about a month where I was up here, but she was still in Peoria finishing up school.
Okay. And then let's fast track even further, because now you guys have been together, let's see, 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years in September.
Oh, excellent.
So just over 5 years now.
So, you know, I actually know this because I'm pretty sure you posted on Facebook like a current modern-day human being sharing your story with the world. But did you just pop the question?
I did in July.
Let's talk about that. How does that go?
Yeah, I had actually had it kind of been planning it for a while. Like she never knew when it was coming. It's kind of one of those things. Like it's kind of supposed to be a surprise. Like she had wanted it to come for like I think since like last Christmas, and I've had the ring for a long time because it's my great grandmother's ring on my mom's side.
Whoa.
So it's a very old ring, but like I took it to get not modernized, but I took it to kind of get like a touch of newness to it. Like it's been worn by like every woman on my mom's side of the family since my great grandmother. So like great grandmother for it, my grandmother wore it, my mom wore it. So it's like a 100-year-old ring. So it's been through the ringer. Like the band was worn, one of the diamonds had a chip in it. So like I was able to kind of restore it to its former glory, give it some new life, and then used it. So it was kind of nice to give something that was of significant personal importance to me to someone who was a significantly important person to me.
That's awesome. You're kind of like Barry Allen. Barry Allen, just holding on to the ring for a long time. Don't know when to pop the question. So take me through it. It's July. It's probably hot outside.
Yeah, because I was trying to figure out like it kind of all snapped together. I started working on getting the ring taken care of. So I didn't know how long it was going to take to get this work done. I didn't know any jewelers up here, so I ended up like overhearing like Liz's mom talk about a place that she got her jewelry like recently like cleaned or fixed them. So I looked up that place, saw it had really good reviews, was really fair with pricing. So I took my ring there, explained like what I wanted done and like what I wanted to do it for, kind of a rough timetable, and like so they took it, said like they would call me when it was getting going, and as that was happening, I was trying to figure out kind of when and what to do with it. Like when to propose, where to propose, if I wanted someone involved, because I know it's a common thing now that you'd have someone staged somewhere to take pictures of it happening or video or whatever. But what had started happening is like we had planned like early this year or even last year. Her family goes to this place in Arkansas like every other year. It's like you go stay on this lake, you stay in a cabin. It's very nice. It's all outdoor. It was just a vacation they had planned for a while, and I'd already taken time off around this time because I was going to go like a day early to take my dog to my parents' house so he's not just stuck at a kennel being in like a boarding situation for like a week. So I was like, I was like, I noticed like the date that I had planned to do that, I had taken the day off a day early to take Max to Danville, happened to fall on the 5th anniversary of our first date, that date where I drove up to like meet her like for the first time since we started like seriously talking.
And the code 39?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Or case 39. So I was like, oh, that's really convenient. I have the day off. And I was like, I wanted to do something that was a little different. Like I didn't want to like, go like I couldn't think of something that, like, I wanted something that was, like, original to me and was significant for things that we both enjoy. And I've had Max, who's my dog, since December 2013. So I got him right after, like, in the winter after I had graduated college and moved back home, because my dog I've had since high school had passed away due to some unknown complications, and he went really quick. And then Max was kind of a stray situation. Like, someone my mom worked with found this dog roaming the streets. It was really underfed. They couldn't keep it. Let, like, my mom know, and it kind of felt like one of those things, like, I just lost a dog. This dog needs a family. I can provide for this dog. I have everything. I have the experience. So it was kind of one of those. I opened my love to take this dog, this little 5-month-old, like 20 pounds underweight dog, and brought him in. And it was, I remember being like crazy. We had like a crazy snowstorm that day. And I remember Liz was still at school, and I remember she drove in on 74 through the snow to be there to, like, went to meet this new dog. And it's a dog that, like, we've both loved since we brought him into our lives, and it made sense that he had to be a part of it. So I was looking at, like, how people incorporated dogs in, and I found a dog tag on, like, Etsy or one of those, like, crafty sites that, like, it was like a stamp tag that said, he wants to know if you'll say yes.
Oh, I
so
love
it's something
it.
that, like, so, like, put it on his collar, with all his other tags, like, so it would jingle, she'd be none the wiser. And then I had planned that, like, we'd go to the dog park on that Thursday that I had off. There won't be really anyone at the park. I can do it there. It's beautiful. It's next to a lake. It's perfect. I don't have to, since I worked, I don't have to worry about having to, like, try and find a photographer. I don't have to worry about that stuff. That's not really me. We're not very public people. I know she said, like, since, like, the very beginning, if I ever asked her in a public space with, like, a ton of people around, she would tell me no.
Oh,
it's like,
damn.
It's like, don't do it at a restaurant, don't do it, like, at a ball game, none of that stuff. That was not, like, she's not a very big public person. She's shy. She just doesn't like to be the center of attention. I was like, you realize when you get married, you're going to be the center of attention. So I think she'll be okay with that. But it was just one of those things. So it's like, it'll be private. It'll be just us. It'll be with our dog. It'll be at the park. It'll be a beautiful day. And then we come to, like, a couple days before, and Lake County, which is where I live, got, like, a 10-year flood. Like, my apartment got some water damage. Some other apartments in my complex, like, got, like, an inch of water in them. It was a mess. Roads were flooded out. And I was like, oh my God, what's happened to the dog park? And I remember, like, well, if it ends up raining that day, I have to have a backup plan. So I figured, like, I'm just gonna do it at the apartment. I'm gonna, like, make the place look nice. I'm gonna have flowers. I ended up, like, the night before, I ended up buying like a flower arrangement that had, like, roses and sunflowers, and there was a sunflower, like, face up in the center, so it was kind of like a plate. And I had the ring. I was gonna put the ring there, and just do it that way. I figured it's the next best thing. It's something sentimental. It's sweet. And it ended up being, it was like a sunny day that day. So it was like, okay, business as usual. Ended up going to the dog park, and, like, 3/4 of it is flooded out. Like, there's the lake part of it had risen so much higher, like, it washed out, like, the old beach and everything. And there was, like, a long grass area where you could, like, throw the ball with your dog that was underwater after, like, 10 feet into it. So it was very flooded out. So I was like, crap, well, we really can't do this. But I ended up, like, finding a good spot anyway. And with everything that happened, she definitely wasn't expecting it, because she half expected it to be while we were on vacation. So I remember just, I went down on one knee. I said what I said. She said yes. Because, like, it's like, hey, I got Max a new ID tag for his collar. And, like, so she, like, looked down and read it. And then, like, she was, like, confused because like it didn't make sense to her at first, and then like that's when I kneeled down and did it, and like definitely caught her off guard, and she was well excitedly very excited. And I remember when we got in the car and she was calling her parents and her family and her friends, and I called my parents, my family, all that. We told everyone, and then we had to do the drive to Danville to drop Max off, and then drove to meet up with her family in Missouri to kind of meet up for the vacation. So it was definitely like a whirlwind. And then we had a whole week where we both weren't working. We were both on this nice little vacation with like sun and woods and water. And it kind of made for like a great, almost like a honeymoon post-engagement type thing where you just kind of get to enjoy each other's company and don't have to worry about outside things getting in the way.
Man, it was like the pressure was off. Your decision to do it when you did it worked amazingly to your advantage because it allows you guys to really settle into that, as you kind of said, at the honeymoon phase and get kind of cozy with the excitement of this just happening.
Right. Like I know if I would have waited and did it on the vacation, I was in a stress for all the days on the vacation leading up to that day.
God, and then if like you try to do it and her parents are there or someone shows up, or then it just makes for like 100 different possibilities of awkward, and
right.
You're trying to respect her wishes because she said try to not make it public, or at least not in a super public space. So you definitely had to be mindful, and it's really awesome to hear you. You seem very, very, very happy. So it's definitely a great thing. I've not yet had the pleasure of meeting Liz yet, but I can tell just by how you speak about her that she is an amazing person who you definitely care about, and that's great to hear that you have that in your life. So I guess what's next is like when's the wedding? What do you guys know that yet? Is that a thing that's been disclosed or?
Yeah, we're still in the planning process on that. Like we locked down a church and we're still looking on venues and all those details, and we've been to places, and it's definitely a process to kind of go through because there's dates and numbers and guests and prices and meal options. There's just so many little details that are just, it's so many things that you have to and you have to do all this stuff in order. Like we locked down the church, so that means we have the date set. So we're doing it in December of next year. Because I liked the idea of not doing a wedding at a traditional wedding time. Like everyone gets married in July, August, September. Those the prime wedding months.
You wanted to be different. I like that.
Right. And it's always because my best friend got married last August, and I was his best man, and it was he did an outdoor wedding in August up here. I'm in a dress shirt, a vest, pants, shoes, the whole dressed up, and I'm just dying in that heat. I'm I do not want to get married with all this heat. And I was it's gonna be winter. I can dress in a 3-piece suit and I'll still be comfortable. I don't have to worry about all this, all the elements getting in the way. The worst I have to worry about is it snowing, and snowing wedding pictures is going to be beautiful. The thing I have to worry about would be really nice to have as to documenting the day. As long as we don't get an ice storm and the roads are blocked, that's that's the worst thing I have to worry about.
Well, I mean, you're lucky though, because we live in a world where climate change is real and global warming's real. And Illinois has been getting less shitty winters consistently in the past several years. I know because I'm pretty much in Illinois, and the winters have slowly faded away. Last year we had 1 day of a terrible snow, 1 ice storm, and then it was 60 for... I mean, I remember we played a show at the Melody Inn. We just played there. The first time we played the Melody Inn, it was 65 degrees in January.
Oh, wow.
And I will never forget, because it was we drove down there and I thought, man, our first show in Indy, it's January. It should be snowing and fucking miserable, and it should not be a fun time. And it was 65 degrees out. Awesome. And a great time.
Yeah, you can't beat that. I remember, it was kind of funny, that week after I had moved up here, which is 2 years ago, we got that crazy weather bout where it dropped 15 inches of snow in a day. And I remember Well, I just moved here and my car, I can't even see it. I just see a mound in the shape of my car. Well, today's going to be fun.
Looks like I should go get out it looks like I got to go get out the shovel and start digging the car out.
Yeah, I just remember like bundling myself up. I took my dog on a walk just around the neighborhood because like there's no one out on the road. So I'm just like walking. I'm in like a hat and gloves, a scarf, a large coat, and boots. And I'm just like trekking down like it's the end of Day After Tomorrow.
Oh man, I love that reference. Day After. That's Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah,
Right,
and Dennis Quaid.
Yes. Oh man, disaster
Great
movie. That came
Gotta
out.
love your disaster porn.
That was around the time like 2112 came out, or 2012.
Yeah, it came out like I think like a couple years before that because I was like that was the next big one after it, and then now we got that Geostorm movie coming out the next like in.
And look what you've just done. A beautiful segue you didn't even know, because I'm actually going to take this. We've definitely worked our way from your college years into your current life with your significant other, Liz. You guys are, starting your amazing journey together here very soon, and you've already been on a journey together. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't start to ask you a little bit about deeper into your past and kind of just shape this around however you're feeling like discussing. But one thing that drew me to you and the possibility of having you as a co-host for Foodies Watching Movies, which is where your podcasting life starts on this network, was your knowledge of movies. And you have a massive, I'm not kidding, folks. I'm probably going to have you take a picture of it for me, actually, so we can put it on the Instagram. You have a massive movie collection. And I want to know where the want to collect movies starts, the drive for movies, why movies. Did you act? Were you a theater kid? What draws you to do that? I mean, there's, again, super loaded question here. We can kind of play off of it however we would like.
Yeah, I guess one thing that always attracted me to, like, I guess with movies and with, like, theater was that it was a chance to escape a little bit. Like, you're not really yourself when you're watching a movie, and you're not really yourself when you're doing a play. You're always kind of separate. You're very engaged in the story that you're watching or you're participating in. I don't know if it's the same like for you, like when you watch a movie either in theaters or like watch a movie that you own or on Netflix or something. You feel you get very engrossed in the story. And you're not really thinking about what's going on in your life. You're just very absorbed into what's happening in front of you.
You almost want to become a character that's in that movie you're watching. I think if a movie does a good job and can really draw a person in, you want to become a part of that universe somehow. And I know that's especially dangerous for a person like me who loves comic books and the comic book quality of the comic book movies we have now,
Right. And it's just that I think the only movie that like I struggled to like really get into was the movie The Artist, was just because you're reading subtitles. It's a lot of like there's no sound really on screen except like background music. So you're just like, felt more like it was like a history class than like really getting engaged in a movie. Like you still remember parts of that story, but you don't get sucked into it like when you're watching one of your favorite movies or a movie that you've been like dying to see.
Yeah, man. Absolutely, well said. So let's go ahead and talk about it. What's the first movie you collect? Obviously, it has to be DVD, predating Blu-ray by a couple years. Then, of course, that loaded question into, do you start replacing your DVDs with Blu-rays? We could go for days on this, but let's go ahead and start at the basics. You're collecting. What movie is the one that you decide, I have to buy this right now?
Right, I think I just had my 13th birthday.
Okay.
So it's like, I feel like when you're 13, it's the first time you kind of have your own money. Like you have like you have an allowance, or you've had something you've done to get some money that's your own that like you don't have to save or put away with, or your parents like. So it's like it's first thing that I had. And I remember I remember finding at Family Video, because then and still now Family Video was like a big store to go rent movies. It was before like Netflix and all that stuff. You could get movies at your fingertips. It was one of those like, movie just came out, I want to see it. I didn't see it when it was in theaters. I'm gonna go rent it from Family Video. They also have a ton of old movies, so it was just like I went there, and it's like one of those things like about Family Video and other like video stores. Like when a movie's been out for a bit, they'll want to sell off their supply so they can make room for new movies and get some of their money back and all that. So I remember seeing the movie Austin Powers in Goldmember on the shelf with like a $7.99 sticker or something on it, and I was like, I have to have that movie. Like I think I don't know if I saw it in theaters. I don't remember if I'd rented it before. I really don't remember that part of the story. I just remembered I really liked the movie, and I liked the cover. I remember it had like a blue case, and it had like Mike Myers on the front, and I was like, yeah, this would be a good movie to have. I need to own it. So I remember taking it off the shelf with the movie behind it, and went up and bought it, and I took it home, and I just like set it on my shelf and like had my first movie that I owned. And I was like, this is my movie. Like I had like VHS tapes, like those old Disney movies, or like the Titanic and stuff like that. But those are movies that like I never like purchased myself. They're like ones that like my parents either got or I got as like birthday presents when I was little. But it was never something like I bought with my own money with the intent that I like this, I have the money, I'm buying it, it's mine now.
If I do remember correctly, the Austin Powers Goldmember case was blue.
It was like a baby blue or like a metallic blue, and it's really sad. I don't have that original movie anymore. I have like the Austin Powers collection, but I don't have that first one I bought. Like I went through like a phase later in life where I was like getting rid of movies, or I was doing something. I wasn't as into collecting. I kind of had like a wave period where I was kind of just, they were taking up space. I was getting rid of them, and it was one of those things like I did like, I think I might have actually given it to GameStop, because there was a point at GameStop where you guys were selling used movies.
Oh yeah, for a long time they did, and man, you could find some interesting gold there, man. I remember one time someone brought in a movie and it didn't last 5 minutes on the rack, and I immediately bought it. It was some Japanese TV show. It was supposed to be like a sketch show, but the show was called Vermilion Pleasure Night. And it was bizarre and hilarious, and it had just a bunch of weird sketches that were super different and out of this world. I'll never forget that. But yeah, GameStop definitely had movies for a long time, and we actually made a lot of business off that, surprisingly. People would come in all the time for used movies.
Right. I remember buying a few, and I sold a few, and I know with like I think anything you sold to like place, you're getting a fraction of what they were going to sell it for. But for a lot of people, if it's taking up space, or if you're getting rid of enough at a time, it made it somewhat worth it. Like if I could go back now, I think all the movies I had sold at that time, I probably would have bought back for myself. Because there's some movies like I'm like, oh, I regret not hanging on to that, or I've like bought it again recently or years after that moment.
You have moments where you probably see a movie and you're like, I totally forgot I had that.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, what did I sell it for? Like $2 or less than $1 or something? Like, what was I thinking? I'm gonna buy it again for $10 just to have it.
Oh, so where does it come to you to start really collecting movies?
I think it was one of those things that I think when I started to see it on like a shelf or on like one of those DVD towers that were really popular at the time. I don't know if they're still as utilized. I don't see them around as often. Like they used to have like those big blue ones, and like the ones that would like spin like a display at a store. And I just remember like the idea of like these movies represent a part of me. Like you could look at someone's movie collection and kind of know a lot more about them without even asking them a question.
Shit, I wonder what my movie collection says to people now that you say that. But I totally understand what you're saying. You can definitely get the essence of a person and what their tastes are based on their movie collection.
And you can kind of see, like, if you see someone's collection over the years, you kind of see, like, an evolution of that person's personality as they've grown up. Like, my collection, when, like, I was in, like, high school and younger, when I was really, like, when I started collecting movies, there were a lot of just like more like stupid comedies, like you'd see like the Austin Powers movies, and like Adam Sandler movies, and like a lot of those movies that like I'm not as into now, but like you see like if you look at my collection now, you see like dramas and like horror movies and historical movies, and so like you've seen like the collection like it's changed. It's like it's evolved as like my tastes and as I've like grown.
And the old stuff is still just a part of you.
Yeah, it's still there. And like sometimes like you pull out a movie like I always like going back to the movie Bruce Almighty with Jim Carrey.
I'm pretty sure you recount why that's your favorite movie on Foodies Watching Movies, episode 1 of season 2.
I did. I think for the longest time that was my favorite movie. I don't think I can name offhand what my favorite movie is now, just because the amount of movies that like I see on a given year and the amount that like it changes. Like I think sure like my favorite movie of this year is Get Out, just because that movie was amazing. I know our plan is to eventually watch it on Foodies. I'm really excited to watch it with people who haven't seen it before, because that movie like blew my mind.
Yeah, Jordan Peele.
Yeah, Jordan Peele of like Mad TV, and then he had Key and Peele, and yeah, it's definitely he really blew the doors off the hinges with his first foray into directing. It was like M. Night Shyamalan in what was that?
Signs?
No, it was the one with what's the kid's name? It was the one with Bruce Willis.
Sixth Sense.
Yeah, but that was it was like kind of like that. It was like first movie out the gate was just like a game changer for people, like not what they were expecting.
Oh, that makes me even more excited to check it out. So I think that I feel like I have like 100 different questions I really want to ask, but I'm not sure where you want the conversation to kind of go.
Yeah, I know in your original thing, before we actually asked the questions, you brought up theater, which is something I did a ton of growing up. It was one of those things like I kind of had like the middle child syndrome going in. I kind of just got my stuff done. I went to school. I had friends, but I wasn't like, I didn't require a lot of supervision. I wasn't getting into trouble. I was kind of walking the middle line. I was getting stuff done.
So how many, real quick, I know you said a brother. How many siblings?
Yeah, technically I have two siblings. I have an older brother, and then I have a twin sister who unfortunately passed away back in 2005.
Wow, that's I don't know if you really want to talk about that. That's totally up to you, based on your comfort level. But that that must have been. Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I can go a little bit into it. I don't want to dive into, because it's really once you kind of when you open that door, it's kind of hard to kind of move forward with it. It sets you back a little bit. But I can talk about that a little bit. So I had a twin sister who was born with cerebral palsy, which I don't know how familiar you are with that disability, but she didn't really have control of like her movement or her speech, and she was like nonverbal. And so she had a lot of problems, and she required like surgeries, and she was a lot more like she was great. Like she had the best laugh, but it was one of those things that she kind of got like a lot of the focus growing up, just because she required a lot more attention, just because she's essentially not like an infant, but she needs assistance for everything she does: eat, go to the bathroom, shower, all that stuff. That was all stuff that had to be done to her. Like, it's not so she wasn't self-sufficient in that way. So it was one of those things, like, my parents' focus was tied up to that, and then I had an older brother who was like 4 years older than me that was outgoing and would get into trouble sometimes, and so we had to get a lot of some discipline from my parents, and it was a lot more of that daily struggle. And I was myself, just like, imagine who I am now as like a 5 and 6 year old kid. I got my stuff done. I asked a lot of questions, so that's just who I am in my personality. I'm curious. I like to know things. So I kind of just got stuff, and my my parents tried to find like an outlet for me. Like they tried putting me in piano lessons when I was little, and I didn't have the patience to get through. Like I remember like the repetition of like hot cross buns and all those like little like 2-key thing, and I didn't like the amount of like repetition at that age, and I just something I didn't want to deal with. So like that didn't stick. I did it for like a couple, like 3 or 4 weeks, and then I wanted to do that. And I tried doing like soccer for a season, didn't really enjoy that. I did karate for like a day.
For a day?
Yeah, like went in, I was like, no, all right. And then like I think my mom was like running out of ideas, and then like someone she worked with at her, because she's a pre-K teacher, so someone she worked with at the school was directing a children's show, which is like it's for kids, I think. Oh, what would it be? Like 3rd grade through 8th grade, I think, is the window they work with.
Okay.
And I was just at that threshold. I was like 8 years old, or just about to be 8, but it was enough that it would work. And took me out for auditions, and like I didn't get one of the parts that was listed, but like they like made a part for me. I don't know if it was because they liked what I was doing or did it as a favor to my mom, or what, they like made me a little part. I was like this one character's like assistant, and I had like 4 lines, and I just kind of wandered around, and I was in like green face paint and a wig and a fake nose, and I had the best time doing it. It was something that like I got to be on a stage in front of people, and I got to be a character, and I got to have fun, and it was something that like I could express myself in a way that I hadn't found before. Like, because like if you do any of that stuff that you do as a theater kid, like in school, you're gonna get sent to the principal's office. It's not like you can't do some of that stuff. So it takes the like restrictions off of you and lets you like just have fun within the confines of this script and the world they've created that you're on this stage to do.
Man, that's awesome. I actually didn't know you did any acting. So this is, again, I'm learning something about my friend that I didn't know, and I like it. Let's keep it going.
Yeah, I kept doing it, audition for like every show, like that I could do up until like 8th grade, until like the children's theater cutoff was, and like I got bigger parts and I had more lines, and got to get to know people that some I still talked to, a lot of which like you're friends for the duration of the show, and then like they went to a different school or from a different town, and you don't really see them again. So it's one of those things like, but for like that 2 or 3 months, like they're your closest friends because you see them like 3 or 4 times a week for 3 straight months while you're getting the show together. And I remember like the fun part about doing this though is like in the spring, certain schools would do field trips during the day to see these shows. So like if you're in the show, you got out of a day of school to get like shuttled to the theater, put in costume, and then perform for like some of your friends from school that day, and then go back to school like you didn't just spend a day performing on stage. So it was a fun way to like express myself, and it was something like I came out of my shell initially from this like shy kid, and I kind of went through, and it was something like I stuck with, and I did like shows in junior high, and I did shows in high school, and I did some shows like the main stage adult productions at the theater I did as a kid. So I kind of got to go full circle, and like it was weird getting to a point where the people that were almost like the people in charge, or like the parenting figure for me as like an 8, 9-year-old, became my peers and my friends when I was like 18 and 19 and into my 20s, when I went back and did shows with them. So it was really weird to kind of go from a point where like I saw them as like a teacher or a parent, like they were like at that level, like they seemed so much older and more like, yeah, like they seemed like more important or more like in charge. And then you get to a point like you realize like, oh, they're actually really cool. I don't know why I thought they were like this way when I was 8, but like now we're friends. We've gone drinking together, and it's weird to get to that point. It's like when you don't want to run into like a teacher outside of school because it messes with your mind.
Yeah, you get a reality of who they are behind the teacher. You know, because the really teachers are kind of a front. You're never going to have, I mean, I guess that's not true. There are people who I've had as teachers in the past that are definitely like 100% themselves. But I think that to protect yourself, you have to be, as a teacher, a little guarded. So to be, on the other side of that and have an interaction with that kind of person, it's like the veil is being dropped. The act is up.
Yeah, it was like the weirdest thing I think about that split was that when I was I'm trying to think what year this was. This is like in 2011, 2012. I did a summer show through this theater company that did their show. Like one show a summer is usually like a musical or a normal play at Lincoln Park, which you probably would have maybe driven past or through when you lived in Danville.
Yeah.
It was on that big like amphitheater stage they had built.
Yeah, totally. I always wanted to play there.
Yeah. So they did I was in the show and there was like adults in the show, and I guess I was also in my 20s, so I guess I was technically adult because there was like younger people in that show too. But the weirdest thing is my first cigar ever was given to me and lit by one of my old high school principals who was also in the show.
What? Okay, recount that. That's too awesome to just glaze over.
All right, so one cool thing about like theater is that after every performance there's like a cast party, which is usually like a gathering of everyone in the show at like usually like someone's house who throws together like appetizers and has like sodas and like drinks and stuff, and like you can come and like your parents can come and all that when you're a kid, and like when you're adult, it's just guys come, they bring beer and all that stuff, and you just hang out and have a good time. So my dad also did theater like in his although he did it as like when he was like a younger kid, but he did it when I was growing up a little bit. He was doing some theater. So that's what like kind of opened my world a little bit too outside of that, was that my dad had done shows that I have seen him in. And he always loved throwing cast parties. He's very party oriented. He likes planning a party, putting on a good show. So he threw the cast party because he was also in that show with me. That was like the first time my dad and I have done a show together, which was really cool.
That's a really special thing as well. I performed in a band with my dad for a long time, as most people know. So I totally understand that cool camaraderie of putting something on together with your parent. It's definitely special.
Yeah, it's a connection like you don't get to have. Like, so he'd thrown this cast party, and like it was in my backyard. I had my pool, and like we had like food and drinks and everything. And I think I'd mentioned at some point during the show that like I'd never had a cigar before, but was kind of curious. So he had a bag, pulled one out, gave it to me, showed me how to cut it off, lit it for me, and I'm sitting there smoking a cigar with my high school principal that I had like 5 years before that, or 6, or however long before that it was. But it was just bizarre to like go from like one side of it to another, to like kind of almost behind the curtain.
Yeah, man, and that's hilarious too. Your dad was a part of you smoking your first cigar?
He was there. I think he took the picture. Like there's a picture of me somewhere.
Oh my
like,
gosh, I want to see that.
I think I'm in like swim trunks, a beach towel, and a cigar in my mouth, and I'm just like, oh dear Lord.
Oh my God, that's like gold.
It might be on Facebook. I'd have to look. I'll dig for it after we're done recording. I'll send it to you.
Oh, that would be excellent. So you used acting as a form of escapism, and it probably helped you get through a lot. And I think that, with the Voice of Survival, we haven't really done this much with any guests talking about their tragedies not defining them, or the ability to see a bigger picture. So you lost your sister, and that's a very tragic thing. But there has to be something that was your drive or your inner determination that kept you. I mean, you're such a uplifted and very, and this is as I know you as my friend. Of course, I've never like lived with you and spent every waking minute around you, so I don't know. There's probably, everybody has a grumpy side. You know what I'm saying? But What drove you to have the strength to carry on past this tragedy in your family? Was it just acting? Was it your collecting of movies? Is it a mixture of the two? There has to be something that guides you through this dark time.
Yeah, I think what it was is just I had to be strong because I felt like everyone around me was broken. Like it was one of those things like it was such like it was unexpected and it really like I know my brother tried to kind of like he was older than me, we kind of tried to like dull it through his own means or so that like my parents tried to power through it, but it was devastating. And I remember just trying to I just felt like I had to be strong because I just had to keep moving forward. So I don't know if it was just trying to be in denial about it or what it was, but I feel like I just had to keep going because it was like right before like the school year had like just ended or was just about to end. And like so we had the summer, so like your life's already kind of there's not like a rigidity to your schedule. You're not going to school Monday through Friday. You're just on vacation. And I was still 15, so I didn't have like a job or something I was doing that summer. It was just the usual summer when you were a kid. You had friends and stuff. So I don't know if there's anything specifically I did. I think I just try and find stuff to kind of. I remember I was really into a game at the time. Do you remember the game RuneScape on the computer?
Yeah, RuneScape. That actually, I think that game still is played to this day.
Really, I was really into it around that time, and I think I don't know. I think I remember keep playing it. I was just on the computer, and I remember I think I tried to throw myself into the hobbies I had that was available to me. I tried not like I didn't like act out into it. I just tried to keep moving forward and trying to keep the status quo of what I had done before. And I don't know if it was like if I push anything down because I feel like I processed it pretty. Like I don't have issues with that, but I had already experienced like it wasn't like my first experience with like death. I had relatives and stuff that had passed away before that. It was the first that was like the closest to home that I've had in my life, really. I mean, there's been some recently that have been equally as rough, but that was like the first, like, I guess the first big one, but it's still just, I think, trying to just keep myself moving forward and trying to find things that keep me interested and just not trying to like become either dull to the world or try and just do anything to shake what had happened.
And I think that there is, and don't quote me, everybody has tragedy in their life. I think it's an inescapable truth as a human being. But for me, dealing with tragedy, I lost someone very close to me when I was 13, different circumstance, altogether. And the thing that kind of pushed me to who I am today was like, well, that was the big eye-opener that you're not granted eternal life. Like, you're not living always. And anything can happen at any moment. We could be sitting here and a plane could fly into my living room. Game over.
Right.
And that's something that I can't control. But the things I can control in this life are the things that drive me. That's why I'm very determined. That's why the network is here. That's why so many different things are on my plate, because I don't want to leave anything unsaid or undone. I don't want to, reflect in my final moments and be like, shit, I could have done so much more, And I think that that's a testament to who you are as a person too, because, even if you don't necessarily recognize it in the moment, you were making the most adult decision you could and saying, look, there's nothing that can be changed. There's nothing that can be undone. The only thing I have going now is to move forward because that's all I have to do.
Right. I agree completely. Like I think that's all you can really do in this life is just keep doing what you're doing and keep trying to live your life to the fullest. Don't because something happened doesn't mean your life as also ending. You still have a ton of life in you, but you don't have a foreseeable end date of your life. I mean, you can estimate till your heart's content, but things can happen in a minute that you can't plan for.
Couldn't say it better myself, man.
Like in a world where a nuclear holocaust is no longer a impossibility, like that's, you just gotta keep doing what you're doing.
I mean, I don't know if you know this, and I'm sure that next week the Puhr Report will probably cover this, but I mean, today Ted Cruz pretty much came out and said he was the Zodiac Killer. So, I mean, that's the world we're living in, is where somebody can admit that they're a terrible person and no one bats an eye at it. I want to move forward in your story a little bit. I feel it's definitely necessary to talk about the movies and acting and all of these things churning forward to a point where I said, after, I think it was not too much longer after our original meeting at Elmhurst when we went to see Deadpool, I contacted you and said, hey man, Veronica and I have this idea, and this other guy have this concept for this podcast, Foodies Watching Movies. Well, there wasn't a name at the time, but the concept was built around food, and liking movies, and somewhere in the middle there. And you expressed interest. So I'm going to get a different perspective on this whole story now as a beautiful little wrap-up to this conversation today. When podcasting enters your life, I know the answer to the question is you were listening to Kevin Smith, and he was one of the first people you listened to as a podcaster. I want to know, as a podcaster, how has your experience been so far? And I'm dating all the way back to episode 1 of Foodies, talking about moving into doing a couple bits on Journey into Comics. You've helped me out quite a bit there. Moving into having your own show now, which is like a beautiful resurrection of your old creation in college. What's this all been like for you so far?
I think it's one of those things, like, it took off a lot faster and became a lot bigger than like I had anticipated going in. Like in the best way possible. But it was like I've had friends before that have had like ideas that like sound amazing, but they don't have the drive to continue it, so it just kind of falls flat. So like you almost have a guarded optimism going into it. So you try and just be as helpful and as encouraging as possible. So I remember like you brought up to me about the ideas, and like you don't have a title yet, but you know it's going to be about food and movies. So I started like you said, like having trouble thinking of a name. So I started like looking up like on like Twitter and Facebook like names that may have already been taken and sending out ideas like film fiends or
the genre junkies.
Yeah. I remember that there was like one I really liked, but I guess it was taken by like some wrestling thing. I can't remember what it was. Oh. I remember like I remember you like saying like, oh, this is already taken, and then I remember like you had talked about like I think when we saw the name, and like I was like, oh, I think that's why I like started like brainstorming ideas that I think would be good for the show, because like wanted to like start helping create a format or what we want to talk about. I know you and Veronica had got together and watched for like episode 0. You watched Twister and gave like a running commentary, but I know you guys didn't want to make it that it was strictly a commentary with discussion during it, because it's not doing justice to both the movie you're watching or a discussion you're having, because you're either going to take away from one or take away from the other. And I know that's some of the issues we ran into when we first started doing the show. It was something like the show evolved so much from where we were when I came on episode 1 to when we picked up with season 2, episode 1, the show had evolved in ways that we didn't even see. Like I would not have, going at episode 1 of season 1, I would not have seen where we were at season 2.
You know, to kind of dive into this on a different aspect and to fill you in. So, you know, you were talking about, I want to fill you in. You were talking about when I originally said one of the titles for the show could be The Voices of Vaudeville.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And there were at the time a wrestling tag team called the Vaudevillains, which is kind of where I got a little bit of the inspiration, but not quite. I was trying to remember the wrestling thing, and then I actually pulled up the movie ideas you gave me, since I still have it on the Dropbox. And I looked over it real quick.
And that was the I think they have some of the names on that list. I don't remember what that list said offhand right now.
I'm actually gonna just real quick read them to you because it's right here in front of my face, so it's not like it's any big deal. We had Genre Junkies, Cinephiles Underground, Home Theater Heroes. I love that one.
I liked that one. Yeah.
Journey Through Movies, play on the Journey into Comics thing. Home Theater Men. Reel to Reel. I love that. Cinema Geeks, Screen Fiends, Film Fiends, Screen Talk, Plus Popcorn, Off the Cutting Room Floor, From the Cutting Room Floor, Red Band of Brothers, Screen Rejects, and Stub Bubs. There's a lot of great ideas on there. I mean, none of those are forever buried, let's just say.
Right.
But on the other side of it, you're talking about having like cautious optimism when things are starting and how things have kind of picked up and whatnot. Sometimes it takes me getting like kind of punched in the face, not really, and refocused to see the bigger picture and how things can shift. And when I have my mind set on something, bro, like very much akin to when you were busting through your fraternity list of interviews. Once I have my mind set on something, there's like really no stopping me. And because I'm very calculated and I like scheduling and I love all of that stuff, with the network, it was not too far of a stretch for me to go, okay, we can put some things into place and have some players. And it's funny because I think you and I had briefly discussed you doing your own show at some point, just offhand, and you had mentioned the Poor Rapport, and then episode 150 happened. I had the conversation with Sarah and V, again recounted on a couple different Voice of Survival episodes, that lead the decision that Brandon and I are going to start focusing on trying to actually build the network. And when Foodies kicked off, man, it was like, look, we had to have a new focus, we had to have a new drive, and it really reinvigorated me on the concept of Foodies watching movies just to give us a new logo. As soon as we had the new logo, I was like, it's a different fucking show. Let's do this a different way. And so far, I've really loved it. I'm actually really grateful to have someone such as yourself who is not only knowledgeable, you're a great conversationalist, you're super true, and I've been really humbled to have you become a part of this network. I feel like there's a slow clap happening in the background. I don't know if that's what that was or, that's kind of what it sounded like. It was hilarious. But is there anything that you would like to kind of finish up on within this episode of The Voice of Survival? I usually typically leave the floor open for my guest to maybe throw anything out there that hadn't been said on the episode. Maybe it's something I should have covered, totally biffed it and missed. Is there any part of your story that we haven't yet got to in this first episode with you that you would like to bring to the fold before we close out today?
I think one thing that I would like to bring, like one of my favorite memories of our time together while you still worked at GameStop.
Oh, please do.
All right, I don't remember what was actually happening, but I remember, I think it was you and Sarah and maybe Eric. Was it like you guys were involved and you were like, had like the closing shift at GameStop on like a Saturday night or a Friday night or something.
It's a party.
And I remember what?
I said it's a party. If it was three of us on a Saturday night, that was like a party.
And I remember I was there because like I feel like I went there a lot on weekends, especially when you guys were working. I'd hung out there. I remember like I'd maybe go to Burger King, grab some food. I would just hang out in the corner and talk to you guys while it was slow, while I was eating my food.
And I would always be like, God dang, I want some sandwiches from Burger King now.
Right. And I remember there was one day, I think we're going to do something after it, but like I got to stay inside the store while you guys closed up. Like you're like locked the door, slid like the metal thing part of the way through. And I was just hanging out just outside the camera's viewpoint.
Yeah, over in the back corner.
Yeah, just hanging out until like you guys like turned the lights off and we left. And then I remember like us in the parking lot, and for some reason we lit off fireworks in the parking lot.
What?
Yeah, I don't remember who had the fireworks, but I remember us just sitting there and like we lit them off, and then like they made a lot of noise, so we all just got in our cars and bolted, and then like met up at like your apartment or something at that time. I just remember it being like the most random event. We might have gone to Steak and Shake after, because I know we did that a few times.
God, we went to Steak and Shake so often, man. That it's weird because the GameStop, all of that is kind of hazy to me, mainly because I was younger. I was 20 and then eventually 21 during my time at GameStop, and a lot of that all bleeds together. Especially, I mean, there was a point there where I think I worked like 4 months straight without a day off. And that was by choice, not by force. That was me just like, oh, somebody called off, I'll pick up the shift. Oh, somebody can't work, I'll pick up the shift. Oh, you need the day off all of a sudden out of nowhere, I can pick up your shift, no worries. Oh, plus my regular shift. Oh, I don't need a day off, don't worry. It's easy. It's only GameStop. It's a fun, easy job, I told myself,
Right.
Until I burnt myself out. It's easy to happen, man. I remember one time, and I actually still have video of this, somebody left a creepy, like, doll at GameStop, like a fucking not quite ventriloquist doll, but like kind of a marionette type puppet,
Oh, that's creepy.
And Derek and myself and someone else put lighter fluid on it and burnt it by the fucking dumpster at GameStop after work.
I would probably do that too, because any creepy doll anywhere that's not supposed to be, not okay.
Yeah, no, not okay at all, man. It's weird because, like I said at the top of the show, I feel like there are so many memories in that point in my life where you are there, and it's just like everything in my life and those moments, get-togethers, parties, events, you were just such a fixture, and the universe did me such a solid and said, hey, man, here's this dude, you were good friends with, and I know that you miss a lot of the people that you spent those times with, and of all the people from the Danville days besides Sarah, you're the only person I still actively talk to.
That's awesome. And I know it's kind of funny that, like, I was thinking about this the other day as I was leaving our network extravaganza that we had, is that I'm the only show that still records in Illinois.
Yes, you are. Holy shit, I didn't even think about that.
Like, every other show records in some part of Indiana.
Yeah, wow. I never even put that together. It's bizarre. I didn't, it's really weird.
Go ahead.
It's really weird that you say that, because growing up, Indiana was like my least favorite state. Now I live here.
But you're like in the Illinois of Indiana.
Yeah.
Like, you're still in our time zone, so it's...
Yeah, we're pretty much Chicago. That's what everybody says. We're pretty much Chicago. Because you can't tell someone the region, because that's not a real thing unless you live in the fucking region. So when you're in the real world and you're not in the region, and someone's like, where are you from? You can't point to a map and go, the region. They'll be like, what the fuck? What region? Right. But you could say Chicago, and they'll go, oh, I gotcha. And you don't have to explain, because there are tons of suburbs of Chicago. So
I'm in the Indiana suburbs. It's fine.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, man, I don't think we really have much left to cover today. I want to thank you so much for last second deciding to be able to be my guest today. Episode 6 of the Voice of Survival podcast. Andrew Puhr, thank you. Again, I'm going to probably say thank you 100 times. It's kind of my MO at the end of the episode. I just let the thank yous out. As always, folks, check the Voice of Survival out on all the different social medias, whether it be Voice of Survival on Instagram, Voice of Survival podcast on Instagram, Voice of Survival on Twitter, Voice of Survival or the Voice of Survival podcast on Facebook. You can check me out on the Journey into Comics network at journeyintocomics.com and on all the different podcasting sites around the globe, such as Podbean, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio. It's pretty easy to find us. I will now turn the floor over to Mr. AP, who will tell you where you can find all of his different things with his plugs. AP, go ahead.
Yeah, so you can catch out The Puhr Report at The Puhr Report on Facebook, at The Puhr Report on Twitter, and at The Puhr Report on Instagram. It's very straightforward. It's all the same name. And yeah, you can check me out every Tuesday on journeyintocomics.com, or you can check out my exclusive content where I do TV reviews on the Patreon at patreon.com/journeyintocomics.
God, that's how pro you are. I forgot the Patreon, and you dropped it that time. You're amazing, bro. All right. Well, man, again, I want to say thank you so much for being a part of the Voice of Survival podcast. As always, I'm the voice of the voiceless, Nate. You guys are listening to the Voice of Survival podcast here on the Journey into Comics Network. Thank you, AP, so much for this.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome, man. Hell yeah. It was great to talk to you and really dive into your life a lot more. I feel like I know 100 times more about my friend who I've known for 10 years, so that's pretty crazy, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome.
But if that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Voice of Survival podcast, I've been your host, Nate.
I'm Andrew.
And we will check you guys later. Thank you so much for listening. Be strong.